Hello everyone, welcome back. Today, we're learning something new while improving our English naturally. Instead of boring grammar rules, we use real stories, ideas, and conversations that help you think in English, not just study it. So relax, listen carefully, and let your English grow step by step, just like real life. Let's begin. Nobody was supposed to know it existed. No address, no sign on the road, no mention in any government document that the public could read. Just empty desert in Nevada, and a fence, and guards who didn't ask questions, they just told you to leave. And if you didn't leave, the consequences were serious enough that most people turned around without asking why. For decades, the United States government did not officially confirm that Area 51 even existed as a military base. Think about that. A place the size of a small country in the middle of America, and the official answer was basically, "We don't know what you're talking about." That silence, that complete refusal to say anything, is what made the whole world go crazy with questions. And honestly, you can't blame them. So let's start at the beginning. Because the real story of Area 51 is actually wilder than most people think. And it doesn't need aliens to be interesting, although we'll get to that part too. Don't worry. The year is 1955. The Cold War is happening. America and the Soviet Union, Russia essentially, are in a very tense competition. Not fighting directly, but watching each other extremely closely. Both sides are building weapons, testing bombs, developing technology, and both sides are terrified of what the other one might be doing that they don't know about. The CIA, American intelligence, had a big problem. They needed to know what was happening inside Soviet territory. What military equipment did they have? Where were their bases? How many weapons? But you can't just fly a regular plane over another country and take photos. That's an act of war, especially when the other country has weapons to shoot you down. So the CIA decided to build something that couldn't be shot down. A plane that could fly so high, so far above the ground, that no existing weapon could reach it. They called it the U-2. And to build it and test it in complete secret, they needed a place that was far from people, far from cameras, far from anyone who might ask questions. They found a dry lake bed in the Nevada desert, remote, flat, perfect for a runway, and completely invisible to the outside world. That place was Area 51. The U-2 could fly at 70,000 feet. For reference, most commercial planes today fly at around 35,000 feet. The U-2 was basically flying in the edge of space. And it was working. American pilots were flying over Soviet territory, taking photographs, gathering intelligence that was changing everything the US government knew about Russian military capability. But here's where it gets interesting. When people on the ground, regular citizens, farmers, truck drivers, looked up at the Nevada sky, they saw something strange. A bright object, moving at incredible speed, at an altitude that no aircraft was supposed to be able to reach, moving in ways they'd never seen before, sometimes making sharp turns, sometimes reflecting sunlight in a way that made it look like it was glowing. They reported it. Of course they did. They said they saw unidentified flying objects, UFOs, and the government couldn't say anything, because if they said, "Oh, that's just our secret spy plane," then the Soviets would know the spy plane existed. The whole program would be over. Years of secret work, gone. So they stayed quiet, and the UFO stories spread. And the government, without meaning to, created one of the greatest mysteries in modern history just by keeping their mouths shut. Now, the U-2 wasn't the only thing being tested at Area 51. After that came a plane called the A-12 Oxcart, then the SR-71 Blackbird, which, by the way, is still one of the fastest air-breathing planes ever made. It could fly from New York to London in under 2 hours. It was so fast that when enemy missiles were fired at it, the pilot's response was simply to speed up. The missile couldn't catch it. These were real things, real machines, built by real engineers who went to work at a base that didn't officially exist, signed papers promising they would never talk about what they saw, and then spent their careers helping America maintain a technological edge that most of the world didn't even know about. Some of those engineers are old now, some have died, and in recent years, some of them have talked. Not everything, but enough to confirm what the government finally admitted in 2013 when declassified documents were released acknowledging Area 51 as a real location used for testing secret aircraft. They waited until 2013. The base had been operating since 1955. That's 58 years of, we don't know what you're talking about. But here's the thing that keeps people coming back to Area 51 decade after decade. The government's explanation, secret planes, spy programs, Cold War technology, makes complete sense. It's logical, it's documented, it's real, and yet, it doesn't fully explain everything that people reported seeing. And it doesn't explain why, even after the declassification, certain sections of the base remain completely off-limits. Not just to the public, off-limits to most people with government clearances, too. There are areas within Area 51 that require special, additional permissions that almost nobody has. What's in those areas? The government doesn't say. And when the government doesn't say, people imagine. Let's talk about 1947 for a moment. Roswell, New Mexico. Something crashed in a field near the town of Roswell. The initial press release from the U.S. Army Air Force said, and I want you to hear this clearly, they said it was a flying disc. Their words. Not a weather balloon. A flying disc. That was the first official statement. Then, the next day, they changed the story. Suddenly, it was a weather balloon. Nothing interesting. Move along. The farmer who found the debris said the material was unlike anything he had ever touched. Lightweight, but incredibly strong. And some of the wreckage couldn't be crumpled or bent. It would return to its original shape immediately, like a kind of memory metal. Several witnesses, military personnel, civilians, reported seeing bodies at the crash site. Not human bodies, they said. Smaller, different-shaped heads. The military took everything, cleaned the site completely, and then spent the next several decades changing the story multiple times. First, it was a weather balloon. Then, in 1994, they said it was a classified balloon from a program called Project Mogul, a system designed to monitor Soviet nuclear tests. Then, in 1997, they released a report claiming the bodies people saw were crash test dummies used in parachute experiments. The problem? Those parachute experiments didn't start until 1953. Roswell happened in 1947. The timeline doesn't work. Now, does this mean aliens landed in New Mexico? Not necessarily. Governments get confused. Records get lost. Different departments don't communicate. It's possible the mess of explanations is just the result of bureaucratic chaos and too many secrets running at the same time. But it's also just interesting that they can't seem to get the story straight. In 1989, A man named Bob Lazar went on television in Nevada and said something that changed the conversation around Area 51 forever. He claimed he had worked at a site called S4, which he said was located near Area 51. And he claimed that at that site he had seen and worked on 9 flying saucers that were not made by humans. He described the propulsion system. He described the craft's material. He said the propulsion used an element called element 115, which at the time did not exist on the periodic table. Scientists hadn't discovered it yet. In 2003, element 115 was officially created in a laboratory and added to the periodic table. It's now called moscovium. Lazar said, "See, I told you." Scientists said, "That doesn't prove anything. You could have guessed or read about theoretical elements." And this is where it gets complicated, because Bob Lazar is either a person who worked at a classified facility and saw things that governments don't want us to know about, or he is someone who told a very detailed, very consistent story over 35 years without a single major contradiction, which is also unusual if he was simply making it up. His education records from the universities he claims to have attended, they don't exist. The government says he never worked for them. And yet, an investigative journalist in Nevada confirmed that Lazar's name did appear in a phone directory associated with the facility. Small detail, but the kind of small detail that makes you pause. Let's step back from the conspiracy side for a moment, because there's something important to understand. Area 51 is real. That's confirmed. The secret aircraft programs are real. That's confirmed. The government lying to the public for decades about what was happening there. That's confirmed. So the question isn't whether the government has kept secrets. They have. The question is, what kind of secrets? And here's something worth thinking about. In 2020, the Pentagon, the U.S. Department of Defense, released 3 videos of what they called UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, the new, more serious name for UFOs. These were videos taken by U.S. Navy pilots showing objects that moved in ways that current human technology cannot explain. No wings, no visible propulsion, moving against 120-knot winds, accelerating at a speed that would kill a human pilot from the G-force alone. The Pentagon said, "We don't know what these are." Not, "It's a weather balloon." Not, "It's a drone." Not, "We can explain this." They said, "We don't know." In 2021, the U.S. Congress received a formal intelligence report on UAPs. In 2022, they held public hearings, the first in over 50 years, where military officials testified under oath about unidentified objects in restricted airspace. In 2023, a whistleblower named David Grush, a former intelligence officer, testified before Congress that the U.S. government has, in his words, non-human intelligence and craft of non-human origin in its possession. He said he was filing these statements under oath, which means if he's lying, he's committing a federal crime. The conversation has changed. It's not just late-night radio shows and people with tinfoil hats anymore. It's congressional hearings. It's military pilots. It's people willing to put their careers and their legal safety on the line. So what do we actually know? Let's be honest about this. We know Area 51 is real and has been used for decades to test advanced military technology in complete secrecy. We know the government lied repeatedly and publicly about this for over half a century. We know that some of the UFO sightings from the 1950s, 60s, and 70s were almost certainly misidentified secret aircraft. We know that some of the UFO sightings were not from those decades and still have no accepted explanation. We know that multiple credible people, pilots, military officials, intelligence officers, have reported seeing things they cannot explain, and that these people are not generally the type to make stories up for attention. We know the government has, as recently as 2023, refused to give full transparency on what it knows about UAPs, even to members of Congress who requested classified briefings. And we know that Area 51, even today, remains one of the most restricted pieces of land on Earth. The airspace above it is classified. If you drive too close, armed vehicles appear. If you try to photograph it from nearby mountains, you will be approached and your equipment may be confiscated. In 2019, a joke started on the internet. Storm Area 51, they can't stop all of us. It was meant to be funny, a meme, but over 2 million people clicked that they were going. Suddenly, it was international news. The Air Force made an official statement warning people not to try it. Actual journalists flew to Nevada to cover it. On the day of the event, a few thousand people showed up to the desert. They did the Naruto run, arms behind them, running like a cartoon character toward the gates. Nobody actually stormed anything. Security watched. A few people were briefly detained for crossing the line. Everyone went home. But here's what that moment showed. People are hungry for answers. Not because they're crazy, but because the official story has never been complete. Because they were told for decades that nothing was happening in that desert, and then found out that was a lie. And once a government lies to you about one thing, even for what they say were good reasons, it becomes hard to know where the truth starts and stops. That's the real legacy of Area 51. Not aliens, not crashed saucers, not Bob Lazar's Element 115. The real legacy is, what happens to public trust when a government keeps secrets for so long that nobody knows anymore what to believe? Here's where I'll leave you. The universe is approximately 13.8 billion years old. Earth is 4.5 billion years old. The number of planets in the observable universe alone is estimated in the hundreds of billions of trillions. To believe that in all of that, across all that space and all that time, we are the only intelligent life, that takes more faith than most people realize. Does that mean aliens have been to Nevada? No, not necessarily. But it means the question is not stupid. It means the people asking it are not crazy. And it means that someday, maybe soon, maybe not, we might get an answer that changes everything we thought we knew about our place in this universe. Until then, Area 51 sits in the Nevada desert. The gates are closed. The signs say to keep out. The guards don't wave. And somewhere behind that fence, something is happening that most of us will never know about. That's not a guess. That's just history repeating itself.